Hello everybody, my name is Jeroen van den Bos and welcome to this session on reading styles and how to use them. An older title of this presentation was how to read, but it sounds, nobody would click on that, right? Like this is more what it's actually about. We all know how to read, but we don't reflect on what different styles we use and how we should use them in combination while prepping or while doing research. And this is what this lecture is going to be about. So in general, this is what I'm going to talk about, how to select sources and how to link them together actually while you're doing your library work or you're gathering them and so on. Like it's very hard, of course, to say what you should read or what you shouldn't read. You know that, nobody else does that. But there is a way that how we use our different reading styles in order to do. And this is where some people make mistakes. They're standing in the library, they're taking a book and they start reading. And they're doing something what they're not supposed to do. In a sense is that they are reading the book to understand it instead of just to classify it and to select the next book. And they're wasting their library time or their online inventory database time while they're supposed to be selecting sources, they're actually reading. And you have to control what you're doing, else you're mixing up all your steps. In order to do that, and do this well, you need to know what kind of reading styles we have and how to combine it. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm here boldly relying on the works by Mortimer Adler and Van Doren. These two wrote a book with the title How to Read a Book in 1972, and this is based on their insights. So you can check out the original book, of course, but it's a bit in that is how it should be done style. But they were definitely onto something. So here you see the levels of reading. There are 4 levels, and their goals, right? Well, the first one is elementary reading. Elementary reading is not about like spelling and getting the letters together and making your first words. And so elementary reading is you can read, right? As you understand, you're able to deduct meaning from words that are written. Do we use that? Yes, we do that. We use this for entertainment while we're reading anything. And this is already where, you see it's only a theory, right? Because if you're reading Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, you will keep your head to it, what they're actually saying and what character is what and so on. So it's more than just, I'm reading and understanding meaning. It goes much deeper, right? But in general, when reading, I don't know, information, commercial, brochures and so on, that's just elementary reading. You're reading, and the meaning is so clear on first level, just get it in. So elementary reading. Let's say that the goal for that is only entertainment, but that's a reduction of reality. Second one is inspectional reading. So inspectional reading, here you're looking for information. You're trying to get something out of it. And here we have 2 kinds. We have skimming or pre-reading or superficious reading. And then we go to the 2 levels which are listed in green here, analytical reading and topical reading. And here the goal is to understand, to go beyond the words and get the understanding of what the author actually tries to say. There's several ways of classifying these things. There's also the dimensions of reading. But in generally, people also distinguish between active and passive reading. That doesn't really work. If you are tired and you have a book and you're already in bed and you start reading, at one point you will fall asleep. Reading is always an active activity. So there's the difference between active and passive reading it's a bit of it's a value judgment here, because they say passive reading is for entertainment, but reading is always active, it always requires energy, so there's no such thing. But for the sake of these dimensions, you will have to put more mental effort in reading for information and reading for understanding than for reading for pure entertainment. So writing and reading are 2 sides of the same coin. That is something that I will actually highlight in the next video about writing and how this relates. So this is really going to be like a mirror image of what we're doing here. Of course, what is reading? This is actually too stupid to actually is sender, discourse, receiver. The information is did we receive the message? Did we receive the discourse? So did we have more? Do we have more information? And we get into the next level of reading, the analytical reading or syntopical reading. Then do we understand the message? That's the difference here between just getting the information and also understanding what's being said and what the intentions are of the author. So that's the next level. Reading as learning. That is actually the whole goal when you're reading in academia. Not only as a student when you're studying as well. It's reading as learning. So instead of learning by instruction, where you have a teacher telling you stuff, or you're watching a video and they lay out what it's about, what's important, what you should keep in mind, and what's your take on this and what you should remember. Or learning by discovery, just figuring stuff out by yourself. Reading is actually a mix of both, right? So you are actually doing all the learning, so there's nobody teaching you, but the book in a way is, a substitute to replace your teacher at the same time, but you're your own teacher. So the better you read, the better you can teach yourself through reading. It's also, this is quite basic, so like I'm not gonna make this more complicated as it is. The whole idea is that you can't ask a book a question, right? Like you can look up for information, of course, but with a living teacher, there's no barrier. If you don't understand something, you can ask for an explanation. If you only have to rely on books, then if you ask a question, you actually have to formulate the answer yourself. Of course, this is only if you look at reading separately. Everybody who has issues, they reach out to an online community or a real community. They find solutions. People are creative. These worlds are not separated. So there's always ways of finding answers. And if you don't understand something through reading, if you only have a book, if you're locked in a room and you only have a book and you have nobody else to ask around, if you ask a question, you have to answer it yourself. And this is where the different levels of reading also come in what are the questions that you ask at different levels. So that's the idea of seeing yourself as reading is learning without a teacher. So if we go to the second level, so we left the entertainment level, the elementary level of reading. I'm just going to leave that for this. We're immediately jumping to the second level, inspectional reading. So here we have skimming or pre-reading. This is what you do actually when you're actually in a bookshop, right? So you take a book. You take a book, you open it, and you're gonna find out, okay, what is this about? So you look at the table of contents. You look at the title page. You look on the other side. So you just take snapshots out of it in order to know what it is about. Usually you start reading a little bit in the introduction, maybe the beginning of the first chapter, maybe you jump right at the conclusion just to figure out, this is what I already figured out what they promised they're going to do, how far do they get there, and usually you can find this information in the conclusion. So this is, here the goal is not to get information out of this book as such. We don't understand the message. We just want to know, what the hell should we do with this book? Can we use it or not? Is this something that's going to be important for our research or not? And this is the skimming, right? So you just skim through the book. It's like not even scanning. It's just like, like little snapshot out of it in order to know what you're going to do. That's usually when you're in a bookshop and you're considering, am I going to buy the book? That's exactly the same what you're going to do when you're standing in a library or you're scrolling through online articles and say, can I use this? Is this important for me? And with articles, it's easier. You have a title, you have an abstract, you have keywords. So these things are already pre-created in order by scholars, by the authors, in order for the reader to make quick choices. Should we use this? Books are a little bit more complicated. Of course, there's a difference between a book that has which is like a multi-author book with different chapters, and each chapter is on a certain topic. That's one thing. Or you can really have a monograph that has a whole argument built up in a different structure and so on. So the skimming, the pre-reading, this is just to know to pigeonhole what am I going to do with that. If you look at the slide, you will see actually, again, the question that should go to your head once you have a book in your hands for the first time and you actually want to figure out what to do with it. It's the same when you're looking at it online. So is it worth reading? What is it going to be about in general? What is the structure? The structure is also important. Like what copy? How does it build up his argument? Like what was the main? Is it going to be like a theoretical part, then some case studies, and then the conclusions and findings? How is it doing? Is it going to work from case, then deduct the theory, and then you immediately make some quick decisions? Where should I start reading first? Is it the theory that I'm interested? Is the case that I'm interested? So you know, so you will dab into the little book, like in the book, and try to figure out what can I do with this. But yeah, if you look here at this list, where to look, here you find the best way. Also checking the index is not stupid. If you have a book and it's a really large book and you want to know what it's about and generally, or like what does it cover, what doesn't, and you're already fairly acquainted with a certain topic, but you don't have the time, just open the index and just like go to the index. If an index is well done, you'll actually have a full list of all the keywords that are mentioned in the book. And by the amount of references, the amount of pages that a certain concept or name or event can be found, you can actually see, so there's a lot about it, because it has an index, it has sub-indexes, so this is really a main topic in the book. That's a very nice way of also figuring out. But the problem is, indexes are dodgy. Not every publisher and author makes them very well. But if it's done well, you can learn a lot from an index. The publisher's blurb. Yeah, why not? They will probably present this enthusiastically, so you can always take a little grain of salt. But in the end, the main target in the eyes of the publisher and hopefully the author is condensed in the publisher's blurb. So you can actually find out a lot of information there. Is this book for me, right, or not? Is this for an expert, or is it for somebody who's new to the topic and just wants to get to know something? So you can get these things out of the blurb. Pivotal chapters. So as soon as you figure out the structure, you want to look what are the main chapters. So say that you have 1 or 2 chapters on literature review, then you immediately will switch to the next chapter that's really about the theory, for instance, right? You turn the pages, you dip in, out, and in. Just see like what's going on, jumping between paragraphs, and then the last 2-3 pages. So often the beginning in the introduction, but the last 2-3 pages is quite interesting in the conclusion. See, like, are they really summarizing their main ideas? Are they immediately highlighting the avenues for future research? So so you can fit in what debate a book fits. That's a good thing to know while you're assessing if you can use it or not. There's another way also of doing inspectional reading. The other way is superficial reading, or reading on the surface, right? Here we do something differently. Here you actually read the text from A to Z, from the first word till the last, but you don't stop. So if you don't understand something, you just quit it. This is something you do mostly when a text is too difficult for you at this moment, when there's still a lot of concepts that you are uncertain about, that you're still working about, and you just want to know, can I figure out the main ideas of this text? And so you read on and read on and read on. Keep in mind, not everybody works this way, right? So I like skimming and pigeonholing books for sure, right? Opening the structure, but when it comes to whole books, people usually don't read them from A to Z. But you might do it for an article. If you have a research article, let's say like 7 pages, and you think it's really dense, it's really complex, and you want to figure out what it's about, you just read it from A to Z and you see to what it relates and what you know. And afterwards you will reread it again. But it's better to understand 50% than not start reading it, right? Because it's too difficult yet. So often, and this is also like as you advance in your PhD career, you will find out that the same text you read in the beginning of your PhD, when you were getting acquainted with the topic, and you read them again in a couple of years later, they have so much more meaning. So it actually makes sense to go back. Keeping decent note also help, but so the inspectional reading is just that, right? And it's also classified here as a level of reading as inspectional reading, the second level. The next level The next level is already the analysis, the analytical level. And here is really about understanding what the author means. So here you're asking yourself 4 questions. And these 4 questions, you cannot just get them from the text, right? So you read the text, but you actually have to think and like have a critical element or a critical engine that's on the back burner, trying to fit in things as a whole for the book. So what is the publication about as a whole, right? If you read the title Democracy and Development, what is this about, right? Is this about democracy and development, or is it about the are they incompatible? Is this about examples that democracy and state stability, like, you know, there's so many things that this title can fit into, but it's only after reading it that you will actually know in which particular debates of a subdiscipline it will fit into. And here you do read to get the details, and the details are important because these give you little hints in what it's really about. And then, is the text true in whole or in part? Things can also be outdated, right? So it's not that the author was making mistakes. It's just that the community, the academic community, that was the consensus at the time. We have moved on now. New stuff has come in. So these things can be still partially right. So it's also nice to know, and you have to track down what is where in a certain academic debate in certain time. For the humanities, for sure, but I guess for the exact sciences it's the same. And then the question, what of it? Why is this important to me? Which elements are relevant for me? And only you can answer those questions. So whenever I hear a PhD student or students say, how much should we read for a PhD? God knows, right? You have to assess that, right? So these are the questions that you're asking while you're reading your texts and your sources. And only then, if you have answers to everything that you need in order to do your research, at one point you have to say, stop. I will stop reading, I will finish my writing, and that's it. Else you can keep on reading, because always new stuff will come out, right? So these are the 4 levels. So the first one what we do is the pigeonholing, trying to classify what is the book about. Then we have the X-raying, getting the meat of the bones, opening the structure, figuring out how the different parts of a book or a text relate to one another. And then the next level is getting face-to-face with the author. What does the author want to say? So not what is he saying, what is his or her intention? What are they trying to say? What is their message that they're trying to bring home? And then also, and this is very important, go beyond their words. So not only what are they saying, what is their message, but are they wrong? Are they trying to convince me of their beliefs? What are their assumptions? From what perspective is this written? And what are they doing and what can't they know? So what is the limitations of the publication? So these are all the right questions that you have to ask while you're doing. In the beginning it's going to be difficult because you don't have enough background knowledge yet in order to assess these things in full. But as you proceed through sources, through reading over the years, doing your PhD, you will be able to relate these things, and you will. And that's also important to revisit older works that you've read before and check your notes and read passages, like important passages again, and see if you cannot understand them with a deeper meaning, especially at the last 2 levels, like leveling with the author and hearing him or her out, right? Then here I've listed like the rules. I think even the term comes from Adler and Van Doren. So these are like 8 levels. So the first one is the classification according to kind and subject matter. So what element of my research plan does this relate to? Is this going to be like in order to define my concepts? Are this going to be information for my case studies? Is this going to be reflective critical analysis or debates that I'm interested in it and that I'm following? So that's the first level. What is this about and how can I use this? Then you state what the text is about, how are the parts linked, and then what is the author's problem? What are they writing out? What are they explaining? What are they disentangling? And then you level with the author. You try to interpret their words. What are they What's the message? And then you move on. So once you know the main hypothesis, the main thesis that an author proposed, that they're defending, that they bring argumentation for, then you have to go beyond that. What are they missing? What assumptions did they made with their theoretical framework that like blindside another aspect of this problem or this issue? Because, and this is of course linked to methodology, every work in humanities takes a certain framework in order to look at reality. And through this framework, they make a selection. They can only link, they cannot link everything, else it would be a very dense description with no analysis. So they only take a selection of the elements that they want to focus on. And this is their theoretical framework. It can be very small, can be very large, depending of the level of the analysis that they're doing. But it's a reduction of reality. So they're reducing reality in order to understand it better. But in doing so, every reduction also blindsides several aspects. And this is where you have to combine different works in order to get a fuller picture of your research object. And this is, of course, what you're going to be doing in a PhD study. So linking these different levels according to one topic, right? Or a couple topics, depending what you're writing on. But also what is not being said. So what is being said? Are they trying to convince me of something that I'm critical of? Can I trust the arguments? Are they biased? Because not every author has good intentions, right? Some really have a political agenda that might not be obvious from when you open the book and might not be clearly stated. So you have to go beyond words to really see what's there and what is actually the aim of the author, besides giving you information and driving, like, how do they want to change your way of thinking? That is actually the questions you have to think about when you are in the last phases of analytical thinking. And then, after analytical reading, analytical thinking, this is the first step. So this analytical level reading is still at the level of one work, right? It's you engaging with one piece of writing, with one text. Can have multiple authors, of course, but it's you engaging with that text. And then the final stage is actually what's called syntopical reading. This is when you apply this to different works. I call them all books here, but they can be books, research articles, and so on. It doesn't matter. And this is when you apply all levels of reading at different stages in order to create your research project. And you see here my project. And your project is based on your set of ideas, on your idea of how to approach your research topic. And because of this, you already know what you're going to focus. You have hypotheses, you have a framework, you have hypotheses that you're going to test. You're looking for information in order to confirm or discredit these hypotheses. So you have a methodology, you have a framework, and you're using other books in order to get to the truth and in order to test these hypotheses. So this is your project. And then you use inspectional reading to relate to other sources in order to figure out, can I use this? And if you can, for what? Are they going to contribute to your theoretical framework? Are they contribute to your methodology? Are they going to contribute to your case studies? Are they going to contribute to your literature review and the future debates? What are they going to do? So, and this is what I try to visualize here. So you're using inspectional reading in order to figure out which of these books are going to be useful for you. Books, pieces of writing, research articles, scholarly works. And some will pass the inspection reading and they will be useful and they will change your research project. They will alter it. They will improve it. They will make it more nuanced, more complicated, more critical. And some will not. Some will not pass. Some will say that, okay, I can't use this. Some will give you, say that book 5 is a fantastic in-depth case study that you can use. Well, it will also improve your research project by giving you more information than your theory can provide and opening different avenues and different frameworks that your theory does not do, but that the case study does, because it has a different goal. and they are related, but your theory doesn't go there. So that's also, it shows you the limits of your work. It's also very important to acknowledge what the limits of your work are, of course. So this is the last level, and this is actually what you will be doing hopefully early on, is you get through your reading, you identify what you can use, and then you start building your own project. And it takes a while to get there, to build up this set of ideas, frameworks, and make it coherent so you can apply it. But once you have it, this is actually how you will engage with the rest of the literature throughout your PhD. And this, of course, is related to writing. I will explain it in a different video. Okay. So this is how the fourth level, syntopical reading, relates to the other levels, right? So first we have the elementary level, just being able to read. The second one, being inspectional reading, trying to figure out which of these sources can apply to you. The third one, analytical reading, trying to figure out what the author has in mind, what they say and what they don't say. And the fourth level, syntopical reading, how this relates to your research project. Afterwards, some more tips here, some rules for syntopical reading. So here you will not read a text from A to Z anymore. You have your own terms, and you bring other authors, other writers to your terms, to your framework. So here you will only engage with the relevant passages once you have identified them. And you bring them to terms. So you have already definitions for your major concepts. You already know how you're gonna approach the matter. So you're not looking for inspirations or ideas. They might be doing something completely else. You're just gonna see what can I learn from them for my research. You have to get your questions clear before, so you know exactly what you're doing and what questions need answering, and looking doing analytical reading with these different sources hopefully will get you the answers you need in order to answer your own questions. So clearing the questions, clearing the issues that you're working on, and also analyzing the discussion. Analyzing the discussion is also very important. So after a while, you need to be aware already what are the current debates. So what is being disputed? Where does this debates come from? Is it methodological debates? Is this empirical debates? What are we talking about? And how they relate over time? So how did they evolve from one another? How did this school, why do they think differently? Which are the most important authors and scholars involved? So you also will be able to, but at a later level, pigeonhole different books into their own research tradition. Some final tips to build up expertise, and I'm talking about expertise that you build out throughout a PhD over the years. It's not something you can do in like a month. So after a while, you will also know how your research project and, in extension, your research interests relate to the larger field in which you're working. So it's best not to define yourself too narrow. Because it's in the cross-fertilization of different research fields that the magic is born, and that you actually discover very interesting avenues for future research. So you cannot be too narrow yourself in order to not box yourself in with only a limited set of text and stay there. So it's better to keep the boundaries open, so you can branch out to other stuff. Will keep it interesting for yourself as well. Early on, I do recommend to read handbooks. Reading handbooks of international relations, political science, sociology, and so on will actually give you a basic overview of what is considered to be the basics. So even if you haven't worked on this, or you're new to it, or like this is adjacent to your discipline but not part of your discipline, read it. You will have a future, a full overview by reading a couple handbooks in what's current, what are the debates, and how are different scholars engaging with, and at least you will know the names of the most important contributors to a certain subfield. Know thy gods, a little bit exaggerated here, of course, but within your own debates in which you function, within your discipline, your core discipline, you should know the most important contributors that actually have influenced the debates most. Both old and new. They're not very difficult to identify, so as soon as you start reading, the same name will keep popping up. And it's also very interesting to keep reading to compare, for instance, bibliographies and reference lists and see what names keep popping up. And if a certain name pops up all the time, then look them up, look their original work up, see what are the publications that were so influential. You can also, of course, but this also depends on the field, look up how many citations certain works have in order to assess how important they were for a certain field. If they have in the thousands of citations and they match your research field, it might be prudent to at least find the text and skim it and see how is it relevant, even if it's not and people are just, functionary referring to it because they're expected to. That's one thing, but at least you should know what they have written and what their conclusions are and why everybody is still referring to them. Take a historical approach. Yeah, this depends what you're working on, of course, and what field, but it is nice to know that you have an historical approach on how the knowledge in your field evolved and which debates were very important in 70s, 80s, before the 90s, 2000s, after 2010. This is stuff you should be able to place. It's also very important to read critical analysis of on your discipline and be able to place authors within them. You can even map them out if you feel that this helps. But of course, many authors will be it's going to be very difficult to pinpoint authors within a certain, because they might write some works which are more in this discipline and some in another discipline. They might have evolved themselves, so be careful by really pinning them down and keeping them there in a reductionist way. And then, of course, make an archive of all these books. Even if you're not reading them but you know that they're very important, just archive them. When they will become important, you already have them archived and you will be able to consult them. So especially if you know that these are very important to your subfield. I'm going to stop here. That's enough. So this is the bibliography of the works that I've used in order to prepare this presentation. There's more stuff here. Some of these works will come back in other presentations as well. So thank you, and check out my next video on writing, which of course is very complementary to this one. Thank you. Bye.